gospel for this Sunday comes from Luke chapter 20, verses 27 through 38. It's found on page 64 in your New Testament if you'd like to follow along. Hear the good news for this day. Some Sadducees, those who say there is no resurrection, came to him and asked him a question. Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife but no children, the man shall marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first married and died childless, then the second, and the third married her, and so on in the same way all 7 died childless. Finally, as a blessing, the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her. Jesus said to them, those who belong to this age marry and are given into marriage. But those who are considered worthy of a place in that age and in the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given into marriage. Indeed, they cannot die anymore because they are like angels and are children of God, being children of the resurrection. And the fact that the dead are raised, Moses himself showed in the story about the bush, where he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Now he is God not of the dead, but of the living. For to him all of them are alive. This is our good news for this day. Please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Grace and peace to you from God, our Creator and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Every time I hear this gospel story about the 7 brothers and the wife, I want to shout one thing. The story is about a woman that has to get married 7 times to 7 brothers, and all of them pass away without bearing any children. And I always ask, and then they ask the question, whose wife will she be in the afterlife? And I always want to yell, why don't you ask the woman what she wants? It's hard not to yell it while I'm reading the Bible, but she's been through enough, okay? She's had 7 marriages that weren't necessarily her choice, but just had to happen. Certainly we can give her a choice for the rest of her days. But they didn't look at women that way in that time period. And that's honestly not the point of the story, even though we might want that to be the point of the story. The story is really about the afterlife, about what happens after we die. It's about heaven and how little we understand heaven. This is a fitting topic for All Saints Sunday. When we think about the saints of our lives that we have loved and lost and we are waiting to see again, they're waiting for us in that better place. And we wonder, what is that better place really like? I don't know how many of you went to Melanie Watkins' Celebration of Life service. It happened about a month ago. But at this service, Melanie, through the brilliance of video, emceed her own memorial service. She ran the whole show, start to finish. And it was an incredibly powerful service, and I'll remember a lot of it for a really long time. But near the end of the service, Melanie was talking about how much she would be hugging her family and friends from once she was on the other side. That she would come back and hug them as much as she could. But she finished that by saying, I don't know how much I get to do yet. And I think that's really what this is all about. What are our loved ones doing? What will we be doing? What will heaven be like? And the Bible does try to give us a number of places where it works to give us an account of heaven. And we read one in our first reading, Revelation. It tries to be straightforward. It tries to give you even measurements. The angel who talked with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city, its gates and its walls. The city was laid out like a square, as long as it was wide. He measured the city with the rod and found it to be 12,000 stadia in length, and as wide and as high as it is long. The angel measured the wall using human measurement, and it was 144 cubits thick. The wall was made of jasper, and the city of pure gold, as pure as glass. Got that? You got it all figured out now? Now you know the length and the width of the holy city. Its walls are jasper, its city is gold. Do you now feel like you understand heaven? Know what it'll be like? Know what you'll be doing? Probably constantly polishing a building entirely made of gold. But even when we dig deeply into these biblical texts that are about heaven, we're left scratching our heads. 12,000 stadia. That's a lot of stadia. Now, a stadia is 607 feet, which makes it about 1,500 miles. Does that help? It's 1,500 miles long, 1,500 miles wide, 1,500 miles tall. Got it? But these numbers, and like most of our Bibles, Nancy's translated it for us to help us out directly to 1,500 miles, because they didn't want us to have to do math, because we don't do math anymore. We leave that to the accountants. So. That's why we had Nancy read today. Handle the hard numbers. But this number is actually not about 12,000. It's not about how many stadia. It's about the fact that the number 12 starts it. 12 is a complete number. Perfect number. So if they'd said the building was 12 by 12 by 12, we'd freak out a little bit because we're like, okay, maybe one person is fitting inside there. But they say 12,000 and we think, oh, okay, that's bigger. But it's still the 12 that matters. It's the right amount of size. It's the complete building. It's the perfect building for what we need. Because when you start thinking about 7.5 billion people alive today, and they're going to fit in a 1,500-mile building, it's not about the 12. It's about completeness. The right amount of size. But to make it a little more complicated for you, because this isn't complicated enough, when we really dig into this Revelations text, most commentaries regard this building as the coming of the perfected church, the people of God, and not necessarily a building that we'll live in, not necessarily our eternal home. But let's be honest, even if that was it, would that be good enough for us? No, we want to know more. We want to know what we'll be doing for forever. We kind of like to know what we're getting into. You know, if you go and buy a house, many of us don't just, oh, that one looks good from the internet. I'll just go ahead and send them some money. No, we go and we look at it, we inspect, we want to know the detail, and that's just a place you're going to live for a few years. So we try to find out more. And we hear from some, we hear about near-death experiences, and we try to peek into heaven through those. Or we hear about people that have visions of heaven and what they see. And a lot of them do agree. I want to show you a video of one person who you may have feelings one way or the other about, or you may have never heard about him. But his name is Jesse Duplantis. And he has a vision of heaven. And he describes it for some 30 minutes, but don't worry, I'm only going to show you a couple minutes of it. But I want to give you a little bit of idea of these visions and see if that's more helpful. I didn't test out the audio on this, so we'll see how this goes.
You see, heaven is wonderful. It's a big place. He hasn't destroyed paradise. It's all around. All completely around that holy city. It looks like it's a planet. I walked out and saw mountains, streams, trees, flowers. the spring with it. I looked, and I just was amazed. And I come out, and I went, glory to God. And the angel went, glory to God. And we both start praising, glory to God. You just say, hallelujah. That starts a reaction, boy. Hallelujah. Just praising God. And I'm looking around. I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I'm walking. I'm physically walking like I am on this platform. Beautiful, gorgeous trees, streams and water, and mountains, totally comfortable. Yet I saw snow, yet not cold. Nothing brown, nothing slush, beautiful, gorgeous valleys, mountains, and streams. And I looked at him and I said, what am I doing here? He said, you have an appointment with the great God child. He said, we must go to the city. Now, paradise is very big. It's huge. So we were walking. We started to walk, and I saw trees lined up on the side of the river of life. Ladies, I knew it was that, with thousands of people under them. It just goes forever. It just seemed like forever. And these, how do I say this? These contraptions were bringing people, and these angels were coming out and assigning people. And I noticed that I was in my clothes. I was in the clothes that I had on. But these people that were coming out of these machines, looking, I call them machine-looking things, some had robes of righteousness, beautiful, glory. And they got out and ran, just took off running straight to that city, man, in that line. And there's some that got out, didn't have a robe on. They had like a gown on. And they would head for that throne. Everybody wants to get to the throne. Everywhere you look, you can see that throne. It's just everywhere. You can see it. It's high.
It has mountains and rivers, snow and grass. People wearing robes of righteousness, and gowns of salvation. So is that it? Where there'll be literal mountains that we can walk up with our literal legs. Where there'll be only one kind of fashion in heaven. Gown or robe, you choose. You probably noticed I don't wear a robe on Sundays. You might have noticed that. For one, robes are incredibly impractical, especially climbing stairs, let alone trying to climb a mountain. But a lot of the heavenly visions have people wearing robes and gowns. So am I saying they're wrong? No. What I will say about them is that they are always attempts to explain to our very limited mortal brains what perfection will be like. And what I've always said about this is that if we could ever effectively explain heaven, crystal clear, it's 100% like this, it would be terrible. Because we would get bored. We would get endlessly, wildly bored. I've seen so many near-death experiences or different conversations where people try to say what you'll be doing in heaven. And a lot of times, somebody will turn up something where you have a job in heaven because we can't imagine not working. It's why all you retired people out there aren't exactly retired. We talk about reading books or listening to every song or traveling to every location all throughout the universe. It always makes me think of one thing. Star Trek. One specific episode of Star Trek. The Voyager series. The team goes and they are met by a pair of omnipotent, all-powerful, eternal beings known as the Q. There's one of the Q right there. He's dressed up in their uniform because he thinks it's cute. But these Q take the Star Trek cast back to their home world, which is just a representation so that humans can understand it. But it depicts a house that's filled with immortal beings that are beyond bored. Because they've read every book, they've told every joke, they've settled every discussion, they know the answer to everything, and now they're trying to figure out, what do we do now? And they don't have an answer. Is that what we have to look forward to after the first 1,000 years of heaven? Okay, you've spent every day eating chocolate cake. You've read every book you could read. You've talked to every person that ever lived. What then? That's my son yelling at the TV picture of me. All the depictions of heaven that I have ever heard of, all of these understandings of the afterlife, always leave out one important issue, the most crucial thing, the most crucial concept to heaven. It's a concept that the book of Revelation tried to portray. The concept of completeness. We all have holes in us. That's something that is missing. And on All Saints Sunday, we focus on one of those holes, the hole of losing somebody, an important person to us, but that's only part of it. We all know what it means to be missing something, whether it's a person or a job or even a feeling that things are not quite right. Anybody here ever been bored out of your mind? Anybody here ever been in such a passionate, great conversation or time where hours went by and you thought it was minutes? The difference between those two things, the boredom versus the time flying, is you were complete in that moment, temporarily. You were doing something you were passionate about, engaged in, something that made you feel whole. But we can't get that completely in this place, in this world. C.S. Lewis describes it this way in Mere Christianity. It's one of my favorite all-time quotes. The Christian says, creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for those desires exists. So anything that we might crave has something that will meet that craving. A baby feels hunger. Well, there's such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim. Well, there's such a thing as water. Man feels sexual desire. Well, there's such a thing as sex. It's a guy writing it, sorry. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. If none of my earthly pleasures satisfy it, that does not prove that the universe is a fraud. Probably earthly pleasures were never meant to satisfy it, but only to arouse it, to suggest the real thing. If this is so, I must take care, on the other hand, never to despise or to be unthankful for these earthly blessings. And the other, never to mistake them for something else of which they are only a kind of copy, or echo, or mirage. I must keep alive in myself the desire for my true country, and you know what he's talking about, which I shall not find till after death. I must never let it get snowed under or turned aside. I must make it the main object of life to press on to that country and to help others do the same. This is what we're looking forward to in the afterlife. Not a perfection of the earthly world, not best food you ever had, but a step better. But a new world that feels every hole in your being, even the holes that we didn't know we had. It's a completeness that we can't even begin to detail because it involves the presence of God, which we've desired our whole lives but never found fully. It desires the forever relationships of those people we love and prize, but we've only ever tasted partially because we know it won't last forever. It involves a completeness to ourselves that we've been racing towards, fighting for all the days of our lives, but never quite get there. So what do you get when you get to heaven? You'll finally be complete once and for all. Amen.